Alva, I dedicated my early career to brain research, not because I liked being in a lab, but because I was obsessed with the concept of consciousness. And then I see that many modern philosophers and a great many neuroscientists today dismiss consciousness as something that is a social construct and that it really doesn't belong in a true science of what human beings are. As a philosopher, do you see real meaning in this concept of consciousness?
I think critics of consciousness have a point that the term consciousness is very vague and can be used in many different kinds of ways. But if one tries to be precise, tries to be a little bit rigorous about it, then I think it's immediately clear that the questions we're trying to ask when we talk about consciousness are legitimate questions that indeed have been asked by scientists interested in the human being for a long time. Take perception, for example. One facet of consciousness is perceptual consciousness. It is just a fact, a starting point if we want to understand the human species, but not only the human species, that they see and they hear and they smell and they feel and they taste. And those are phenomena that need to be explained. Now, those are not merely mechanical things that take place inside them, even though there are mechanical, that is to say, there are sort of brute causal processes that take place inside me when I hear a song. But among other things that happen when I hear a song is I have an experience. I undergo the song. I am affected. I have emotions. I have an experience. And that needs to be explained. We've always been trying to understand that, in the 19th century, the tradition of psychophysics that developed tried to look at the relation between the strength or character of different magnitudes of energy and our physiological responses. Well, part of the thing we want to understand is what makes that response a visual one? What makes it an auditory one? What makes it emotional? Those are all legitimate questions. And to say that we can't study consciousness in science or that it's somehow not fit for the study of science is really just to say that our nature isn't a fit subject for science.
Well, I think the distinction between psychophysics, where you have a very clear input-output analysis, maybe behaviorism, where you looked at purely what we can know for sure. You know what inputs go in, you see the behaviors, so you try to infer what's inside the black box, so to speak. Then you're on good scientific grounds. I mean, that's the argument. And certainly in the psychophysics, you have relationships between sensation and amounts of energy. But can you then jump to this seemingly amorphous concept of consciousness, this sense of the I that I feel, this apparent self-awareness, the so-called binding problem where all the different inputs I get, I can sort of unify into a one I, that I am a human being and I sense this unity? Is that just meaningless, or is that something fundamental?
Well, you allude to a methodological issue, which is to what extent can science rely on the report of people about what's going on in their mental lives in the doing of science. And that's risky. Introspection is risky. Oh, I think it's very loud. Oh, I think it's not quite as loud. That becomes sort of slippery. But whole new doors have opened up for science by taking first-person reports of subjects seriously. Think, for example, about research on color perception, color vision, where we're interested in very fine similarities and differences between colors, or in the effects of mixing colors, or in afterimages. The only way to know about an afterimage is by asking a subject about the character of the afterimage. And if you fixate at a sample of red, the afterimage that you have will be green. That's a fact. That's something that needs to be understood and needs to be explained, and steps have been taken to explain that, among other things, in terms of properties of the nervous system. So it's just, in 2007, it's a non-starter to say that somehow these questions should be off limits because they involve personal reports of living human beings about their own experience. Our science has moved beyond that. Where we still really find ourselves on methodologically weak ground is what the general shape of a theory of experience, perceptual or otherwise, should look like. Should it be framed in purely neurological terms? And by the way, I want to say that nobody thinks it should be framed in purely neural terms. That is, people who do neurophysiology are always interested in neural function. If they're interested in neural function, they're asking questions about what the nervous system is doing,
Sure.
which means they need to reason in terms of information processing as a standard way of talking about it. But there's different ways that one might go, but the basic idea is one needs to ask oneself sort of systematic questions about, what we talk of the visual system. What is the visual system doing? And then one can ask anatomically, how is the visual system realized? And what else does the visual system depend on? So I think there are interesting, open, methodological questions about what shape a science of consciousness can take, but that it is a vital area for human concern, for scientific concern, seems to me now really settled.
What are the implications of that? Take that forward. What follows from that if we project ahead decades? How will the science of consciousness develop so that our confidence in it will increase, and also that we will have a feeling that it's addressing this critical internal issue about not that I just see, feel, hear, but that I really understand the I that seems to be doing these things?
There's a poet, his name is escaping me, who wrote, I no more wrote than read that book, which is the self I am. Right? I'm a mystery to myself. I no more wrote than read that book, which is the self I am. But I want to understand myself. I want to understand my children. I want to understand my life. In trying to do that, we draw on learning from all different areas. I think one of the big messages that will come from what I envision as the neuroscience of the future is a kind of anti-individualism, a recognition that we are partly made up by the world in which we find ourselves. The brain develops as it does under the active influence of the physical touch of the nurturing caregiver. Why do we breastfeed? We don't breastfeed for milk. We breastfeed for touch. They get us to go for the milk, but what we really get is the touch that gives us that interpersonal contact that spurs all sorts of neurological events in us. From the very start, we're coupled. We're not alone. And I think that we're only going to really understand how we work, why we are the way we are, and this will have medical implications, if we take that external kind of perspective of seeing the animal like a plant, as rooted in an environment, dependent on that environment, and even constituted by that environment. I find that a beautiful picture, and it seems to me that science is moving in the direction of substantiating it.